Welcome to a slow, beginner-friendly lesson on type hints in Python, made for absolute beginners. Labels for your code. Today you add type hints to your functions. A type hint is a small label that says what type of parameter should be and what type of function returns. Name: str. Arrow str. Python itself does not enforce these labels at runtime, but your editor uses them to warn you about mistakes, and other developers use them to read your code quickly. We work entirely inside a small project you can rebuild with UV. By the end you will annotate every function you write. Hints make contracts clear. Here is the project for this lesson. A folder called my project with a pyproject.toml created by UV, and two Python files, formatting.py, where we write annotated helper functions, and main.py, where we call them. Two files, flat layout, exactly the pattern you learned in the previous lesson. The only new thing today is the colon and the arrow inside formatting.py. Two files, flat layout. Create the project with UV init my project, then move into the folder. Type hints are part of the Python language itself, so you do not need to install anything extra. No UV add is needed. If you want a stricter type checker later you can install MyPy with UV add --dev MyPy, but for this lesson the standard library is enough. Open the two files and you are ready. UV init builds the scaffold. The run rule is the same as before. You always run main.py. Open main in your editor, import formatting, call the annotated functions, and run with UV run python main.py. UV uses the project virtual environment automatically. You do not need to activate anything. You will see the same output as without hints, because hints do not change what the program does. Always run main. A type hint is a label. It names the kind of value a function expects, so the reader and the editor both know. Names for what flows in. A type hint is a label. Name: str tells the reader that name should be a string. Arrow str tells the reader the function returns a string. The label lives in your source code. Python reads it, stores it, and ignores it at runtime. The label is there for humans and for tools. Your editor reads it. MyPy reads it. Other developers read it. The program runs the same with or without the label. Labels, not enforcement. Why bother writing hints when Python does not enforce them? 4 reasons. 1. Editors use them to warn you the moment you pass a string into a function that expects a number. 2. The function documents itself. The signature shows what goes in and what comes out. 3. Refactoring becomes safer because the editor tracks every call site. 4. Tools like MyPy can check your whole project for type mistakes before you ever run it. Readability and safety. Here is the simplest annotation. Def greet, then inside the parentheses, name: str. The colon separates the parameter name from its type. Str tells the reader that name should be a string. Run the code and call greet with Ada, you get hello Ada. Now call greet with 42. Python still runs it and prints hello 42. Hints are not enforcement. They are a label that the editor uses to warn you that you passed the wrong type. The colon syntax. Now annotate the return type. After the closing parenthesis, write arrow str before the colon. This says the function returns a string. The full signature reads naturally: shout takes text, a string, and returns a string. You can also annotate variables in assignments, like result: str equals shout hi. That tells the reader that result holds a string. Variable hints are optional but they make the intent obvious. The arrow syntax. With hints, your editor warns you the moment you pass a string where a number belongs. The editor sees the contract. When a function takes several parameters, annotate each one. Def repeat, text: str, comma, times: int, arrow str. Text should be a string. Time should be an integer. The function returns a string. Call repeat with a b and 3, you get a b. Call it with the string 3 instead of the integer 3, and your editor marks it as a mistake, even though Python would still run the multiplication. Annotate every parameter. The most common built-in types are str, int, float, bool, and list. Is_adult takes an integer age and returns a boolean. Total takes a list of prices and returns a float. Label takes a floating point score and returns a string formatted to 1 decimal. These 5 types cover most of what you annotate in beginner code. For more specific container types, like a list of strings, you will use the typing module, which we will meet soon. 5 built-ins cover most cases. When a function does something but does not return a value, annotate it with arrow none. Print banner takes a string and prints it between 2 lines of equals signs. It returns nothing. The capital N in none is important. It is the Python value none, not the string none. Arrow none tells the reader that the function is meant to be called for its side effect, not for a return value. Calling it and assigning the result will give you none. Use arrow none. Python ignores hints when it runs your code. They exist for humans and tools. Hints are optional at runtime. Compare two versions of the same function. Without hints, the signature reads def repeat, text, times. The reader has to guess that text is a string and times is an integer. They might pass them in the wrong order or use the wrong types. With hints, the signature reads def repeat, text :str, times :int, arrow str. The contract is visible. The reader knows exactly what to pass and what to expect back. The body of the function does not change. Only the signature gains labels. Before and after, open main in your editor and type from formatting import as adult. Then type as adult with the string 20 in quotes. The editor draws a red squiggle under 20 and tells you it expected an integer. That warning comes from the type hint. The editor reads the annotation in formatting.py and checks every call against it. Fix it by passing the integer 20 and the warning disappears. This is the everyday payoff of type hints. Warnings as you type. Some functions might return nothing meaningful. Find user takes an integer user ID and returns the username, or none if the user does not exist. To express this, import optional from the typing module, then write arrow optional of str. Optional of str means the return value is either a string or none. The editor will warn you if you use the result without checking for none first. Optional is one of the most useful types in the typing module. Optional means maybe none. Watch what happens at runtime. Add takes two integers and returns their sum. Call add with 2 and 3, you get 5. Now call add with 2 strings, and you get the concatenated string AB. No error. Python did not enforce the hints. Hints are documentation for humans and tools, not a runtime check. If you want real checking, install MyPy with uv add --dev mypy and run uv run mypy formatting.py. MyPy reports every type violation statically. Hints do not enforce. Some habits that pay off. Annotate every function signature, even short ones, so the whole project has a consistent style. Use arrow none for functions that exist for their side effects, like print and file writes. Import optional from typing whenever a function might return none, so the caller remembers to check. In larger projects, add mypy as a dev dependency and run it before commits to catch type mistakes across the whole codebase. Habits that pay off. Type hints are labels. Name :str says a parameter is a string. Arrow str says a function returns a string. Editors use these labels to warn you about mistakes as you type. Python itself ignores them at runtime. Use arrow none for side effect functions and optional of str for values that might be none. Hints make code easier to read, easier to refactor, and easier to check with tools like MyPy. Hints in one breath. Next lesson we step up to project organization. When your project has many modules, you group them into folders called packages. You meet the dunder init file that marks a folder as a package, and the src layout, which is the standard way to keep your source code and your tests cleanly separated. After that, we replace print with the logging module, so your programs can report problems at different severity levels. Packages come next. If you want a quick practice, add an isEven function to formatting that takes an integer n and returns true when n is even. Annotate the parameter as int and the return as bool. Then import it in main and print the result of calling isEven with 4 and with 5. You should see true, then false. The annotation makes the signature read like a sentence. IsEven takes an integer and returns a boolean. Annotate one more function. Quick self-check. Can you explain in one sentence what a type hint is and why Python does not enforce it? Can you annotate a function that takes a string and returns a string? Can you explain when to use arrow none? Can you describe how your editor uses hints to warn you about type mistakes? If any of these feels shaky, re-watch the matching part before moving on. Say each out loud. Thanks for learning type hints. Next we organize many modules into a clean project layout. See you in the next lesson.